We're now getting to the point where we can all just create individual apps for ourselves now that I don't even care if anybody else ever sees it. All I need it to do is fix a problem for me. And if I can make my own app that solves my own problem, then I don't need to go and buy an app from someone else.
Hello and welcome to the AI Evolution podcast. We're back again. Sadly, this time we're not together in person, but we have got lots of fun things to talk about in the world of AI. And to be honest, I think it's probably 6 weeks or so since the last episode. It's been a pretty busy 6 weeks in the world of AI. But before any of that, let's introduce Ben and Dave. As they say in Wales here, what's occurring?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How you guys?
Yeah, how you guys been? You've had a good few weeks?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's been busy.
Yeah. It's been, studio's been taken off, loads of stuff going on. I've started up my other AI podcast again because it was still ranking and I just felt like it was a shame to not do anything with it. And what I've been doing, just as a shameless plug, but what I've been doing is going back and talking to people that I spoke to a few years ago to see how they feel differently about AI now than they did back in 2023. So that's been quite interesting I've just started doing that. So that's been interesting to see how people's feelings have moved on and what they think and how they're using the tools have moved on. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
That's a really interesting thing. I was talking to somebody the other day actually who, 2, 3 years ago, I was talking to them about AI and they were kind of, it's all rubbish. Don't trust it, blah, blah, blah. And then I met with them last week and they'd had a kind of road to Damascus conversion. They'd spent some time with Claude and that was it. They were all in, So,
yeah.
Yeah. I've been busy directing remotely through Riverside, various people around the world for a project, which has been really fun. And some of the people I've been working with have become really anti-AI, which is interesting. So they've had the opposite journey and sort of trying to use it less in their life and to rely on it less.
That's really well. I think there's an episode right there. Actually, maybe we can explore that, the kind of the sort of the yin and the yang of AI at some point, and people moving towards it, people moving away from it, and what that means. And also, Ben, I believe that you're 21 again.
Yeah. I had my 53rd birthday this week, so that was fun. Nice to see birthday. You, Alan. Yep, thank you. Which they seem to be coming quicker now.
There we are. Excellent.
Speeding up.
Well, we'll kick off today. I've got a long list of things which actually the guys were sort of ribbing me about earlier. So, but I don't think any of them are too long in themselves. So hopefully we can kind of bust through them fairly quickly in some respects. But we don't want to undercut them either. So. I'm going to start off with the sort of two big announcements in terms of models that have actually happened since we last spoke. Claude Opus released 4.7, which I think was pretty significant. And then also ChatGPT launched 5.5. Before we get into ChatGPT and sort of how they're performing against each other, it'd be great just to sort of think about them alone, I suppose. And I've been using Opus 4.7 quite a bit. And it's quite interesting because online and sort of in the media, I've been seeing a lot of people complaining about 4.7, going, they've nerfed, Claude, it's not as good as it used to be, and the performance is degraded. And I can't honestly say that I've really noticed that in the work that I've been doing. I mean, equally, I've not noticed any enormous step change either from 4.6 to 4.7. It might be fractionally better, but I've not seen the kind of negative outcomes that sort of many people have been sort of talking about. I mean, have you guys used Opus at all for 4.7?
A little bit, but I haven't tested it in anger.
Yeah, I don't use Claude at all.
Oh, okay.
I
didn't know that, Dave. Oh,
no, I'm exclusively ChatGPT.
Wow. Okay.
And maybe a little bit of Gemini if I'm in a Google Doc or something and I want a little bit of something. But yeah, I don't use Claude at all. I really don't use many tools. I think, and this is something maybe we can talk about at some point, but I feel quite locked in to ChatGPT at the minute because all of my projects are in there. All of my history is there. And I've kind of got it to a state where if I ask it to to write something or to use my voice, it kind of knows, and it's kind of learned pretty well. And I just don't have the stomach for going back and retraining a whole nother AI platform.
Yeah.
That said, I also don't do any coding at all or anything like that. So I think if I was doing more kind of software engineering and needed to do some, some scripting or some kind of code or something, I probably would use it for that.
My big problem with Claude is I've only been subscribing a few months, but by the time I get to it, my 12-year-old son has used all the credits. So
Right.
he's connected it to Blender this week for doing 3D stuff. He's making games. He's using it for all sorts of development stuff. And interestingly, it's really spurring him on to learn C++ and other coding languages. He's not just using it as to do all his work for him, but generally by the time I have finished my work, all the credits are gone.
See, that's interesting. So I've basically kept Albert away from Claude 100% for exactly that reason, Ben. And so he has access to ChatGPT, which doesn't seem to kind of run out of credits nearly as quickly as Claude does.
No way, no.
And so he sort of has sort of free usage of that. Whereas, so for me, any serious tasks I'm doing now are in Claude, and then the sort of lightweight tasks, if you like, I use ChatGPT for, so that I'm not using Claude credits on kind of frippery or lesser tasks. And I suppose it's the sledgehammer for the sledgehammer activities, but not for cracking the nuts. Scenario.
Yeah.
And I think that balance seems to work. I do understand what you're saying, Dave, about the migration thing, because I had that moment about a year ago when I was using almost ChatGPT exclusively at that point. Well, I was using Manus and a couple of other things, but in terms of the main AI system that was being used for me. But I really started to become quite aware that when I did side-by-sides with Claude, I was kind of going, no, I'm getting better outcomes. So I went through the pain of migrating effectively, my workflows and conversations and things across. And now it's there. And if I wanted to go back to ChatGPT as a sort of my serious model, I have the same problem. Let's imagine a world where tomorrow OpenAI announced GPT-6 or something, and it's just way ahead of everything else, and it's a massive step change. Then I'd have to sort of sit there and think, how do I go about that and migrate back across? Because you're right, like all ecosystems, like Apple, like Google, whatever it might be, you kind of get built into that world, don't you, over time, and then
which is by design.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's like the mafia. You'll never leave.
Exactly. And it's and this goes back to maybe something that we've touched on a little bit and probably will continue to talk about, which is what we use the various tools for and how we use AI in our sort of day-to-day lives. And in the beginning, in the very beginning, it was fun to go and get it to write stuff and to create things for you and to do all sorts of kind of original activities, if you want to call it that. Now I use it as an editor more than anything else. So I pretty much write everything first and then put it in and ask it to edit that for me, or have I forgot anything, or just to tweak it to kind of see if I've, missed any major points, or if it can come up with, maybe some more elegant language. And it's quite good at doing that. And then literally I just kind of do the small edits for my own stuff. So I haven't really used it except, and I'll give this caveat, I used a platform the other day to build my social network platform that I've been wanting to build for several years. And literally it took 2 queries to build a nearly functional microblogging platform. But even that was quite light and pretty easy to do because I knew exactly what I wanted. But yeah,
what did you use for it to build it?
It's like a tool called Lovely or something.
Lovable.
Okay.
Lovable. Yeah. It was Lovable.
Yeah.
And somebody had done some work for me, and they created basically a wireframe in Lovable and sent it to me. And so I was looking at the wireframe and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I might have a little, I might have a go at it myself. And I was just sitting there, and I signed up for the free account or whatever. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, what should I didn't even know, I didn't want anything. I just thought, what could I put in? And I just thought, oh, I've got this, I've had this idea for this, platform that's got only verified users or whatever. So I was like, okay. And because I've learned over time how to write, I think, a fairly efficient prompt, Basically, I only had enough tokens to do like 2 queries, and that was it. So I just thought, okay, I scoped out kind of what I wanted, did the first one. It literally created a better looking version of all the stuff that it took us a year to build a couple of years ago. And I just looked at it and was like, Jesus. And then I used my next token to get it to build all the sub pages and all the other stuff that kind of needed to go with it. And then it was like, oh, you're out of tokens for the day. And I was like, okay, so I'll wait till tomorrow. And then the next day I went back and just said, now connect all the pages together so that they all work the way they're supposed to and everything's integrated with each other. And it's just like, okay. And that burned my token for that day. But basically, I now have, it's not plugged into any backend. So there's a huge amount of work that would still be necessary. But like I could take what I have to go and get funded easily, to go and get funding. And that work took us nearly a year to do last time.
Yeah.
When we did it a few years ago. So it's nuts.
Yeah. I've got a really similar story. For my birthday, my nephew, who's in his mid-20s, came down, and he's a fantastic photographer. And he had, with the help of OpenAI, had built an app for doing calendars and all sorts of other printed material with photos, montages, really clever app. It's taken him a year, exactly the same, with OpenAI. He's learned as he's gone along. And my son was sitting next to him on the sofa and said, do you want me to do an iPad version for you? And he goes, yeah. So he put it into Claude, and probably 15 minutes later, he had a fully working iPad version with no bugs. And and my nephew was like, that's insane, like the amount of work I've put into that. And I've had a couple of apps that I've redone, really, really wrestled with AI, and just redone them recently with Claude or Codex, and it's just gone off and done it. And it is the difference in a year ago is insane, really.
No, it really is.
So can I just, and this may segue into something that I wanted to talk about, but how do you find it with the tokens and stuff like that? Because I know tokens are a big thing, and we've already talked about using all the tokens, and how much that costs. Like, how much are you paying? Are you using the free version? And then how much is that actually costing you to be able to develop, say, a small app or like a web app? Because I have not an idea. I have a need for the studio that there's not a platform out there that does exactly what I want it to do. And I have considered going and using like a Claude to try and build what I need. It's not particularly difficult. It just has a few very particular features based on my personal circumstances. And this is something I think we talked about when we were together, is that we're now getting to the point where we can all just create individual apps for ourselves now.
Exactly that.
I don't even care if anybody else ever sees it. All I need it to do is fix a problem for me. Yeah. And if I can make my own app that solves my own problem, then I don't need to go and buy an app from someone else. Yeah. So what's been your experience of doing that? Like, how much does it actually cost to have a meaningful amount of tokens, and how long do they actually last?
Well, my user case was exactly the same as yours. I made something for myself that wasn't available. A hard drive logger. There's app, subscription ones out there. I'm really sort of not into the SaaS model anymore. It drives me nuts with Adobe and everything else. So I just built my own. The first time a year ago, it took me a lot of wrestling. This time it took me a couple of days to do the same thing. And I use it. I use it every week. Not every day, but I use it every week. And I have a subscription to OpenAI, and I have a subscription to Claude, and that's it. If I think I'm going to wrestle with it, I'll use OpenAI, because I know I'll get a lot more credits out of it. And I've only run out of credits on OpenAI once in the last month, and that's because I was working on 5 different apps at the same time. I wanted to see I actually wanted to genuinely see what was possible, right, compared to Claude, where like I'm doing a couple of hours of work and I run out, and it was starting to really frustrate me. So
is that the £20 a month version?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it is really generous, really, really generous. And I'm hammering it for the new image too as well. And it's a lot more generous than Claude. It's not as good. I don't think it's as good at specifics. I think it's good, like you, Alan. Yeah. I think it's good generically and for most things. But also, I really take the credits into account before I start a project now.
Would you?
Yeah, I think it is a case of balancing it, because I I'm using I'm using Claude Max now because I simply couldn't function within the £20 a month, program.
What's max? Is that 200? Is it quite a
No,
jump?
there's the Max Lite, which is half that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can go. I haven't gone to the full Max
Yeah.
yet.
You haven't gone to the
But,
max. And do you how much extra do you get for
yeah,
that? Do you run?
so the difference really is that on the Pro plan, I was kind of 2 hours, and I've burnt through my credits for the day, and then I'm getting a message saying, you can have another go at 8 o'clock tonight or something. It's just not much help when you're in the middle of a workflow. Whereas I've yet to hit the limit, and I've been using Claude throughout an entire working day on the Max Lite, and it's fine. There is one thing though, which no one seems to talk about on social media, but is definitely a thing. If I've been using Claude all day, by the time I get to about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it starts telling me I've not hit my token limits, but I've hit my usage limits, i.e. I've asked it too many questions, and it's saying your frequency is too fast. You're asking me too many questions too fast, and frankly, we're not very happy about that. So please slow down. And so it doesn't stop functioning, but you end up in a situation where you get this warning message, and you have to keep resubmitting the same request, which actually, ironically, obviously increases the frequency of your request. Yeah. And then you end up in this vicious circle where then it just sort of breaks down, and you do then have to just go away and leave it for a few hours before it kind of goes, oh yeah, it's the equivalent of the AI saying to you, the user, stop spamming me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very odd, and I don't appreciate it. I have to say that, from Claude, because the whole point of paying for a slightly better service is that sort of thing doesn't happen. So I don't know, but I guess it's because they could potentially have a situation where someone's out there with just a kind of automated thing firing off stuff. However, surely that's the point of the usage, the token usage, to limit that sort of behavior, and because there is still a limit somewhere within that. But I will say it's worth it because, like I said, I've done side-by-sides in the last sort of month or two where I've submitted identical prompts into both systems, just testing them out. And the outputs from, Claude are noticeably better, to the extent that I can say with Claude, there's maybe a 70 or 80% chance I can one-shot something, whereas with OpenAI, that's probably only ever sort of 20%. Most of the time I'm having to do quite a few iterations before I get to where I need it to be, or even take the output offline from OpenAI and just work on it manually to get the final bit over the line to where I need it to be. So I do think that. And interestingly, this week there was published the arena. So the code arena is where they test all these models now. And obviously we've had these two models coming out, 4.7 and 5.5. And so Claude Opus 4.7 went straight to the top of the leaderboard, as you maybe might expect. With a score of 1,572. 5.5 only made it as high as number 9 on the leaderboard. And in fact, it's below Claude Opus 4.6. It's below Kimi K2.6. GLM. It's below Claude Sonnet 4.6. So, and Muse Spark, which is the dreadful Meta one. So it's kind of a bit shocking, actually, that 5.5 is so low. And you have to sort of look at OpenAI and think, yeah, your wheels have come off a little bit here, because if that's your frontier leading model and you're almost outside of the top 10, you might have a bit of a problem going forward. And particularly in terms of the fact that they obviously are using these models to develop their next model. So, if Claude are using Opus 4.7 to build the next model, its ability to do that better than ChatGPT's ability to build their model from 5.5 is just going to keep widening the gap, and then it becomes almost impossible for OpenAI to actually close that gap down. So it'd be interesting to see how this plays out. But there was some good news for OpenAI actually in the last few weeks, which we'll come to in a minute, which is the image stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think the two models at the moment for me, like I say, are because of the kind of high ceiling limits in terms of usage on OpenAI, and I think their mobile interface is way better than I mean, Claude's mobile interface is junk. It's pointless. It's rubbish. It's a waste of time. I can't even look on it and see the stuff I've been doing on my computer on it. Literally, those things are not connected. So it's nonsense. In fact, I would say. So I'm doing something in co-work in Claude. I can't see that on my mobile device. Now with OpenAI,
Right.
everything's linked together. It's got much better chat facility. It's got visual. You can open up the camera. It can tell you what's. It's just way ahead. So I think for horses for courses, for me, both have absolute value, and I use them all the time. But yeah, it would be a shame if the underpinning model with OpenAI just got further and further and further away, because eventually it becomes a point where you say, actually, this is so far behind now, maybe it isn't, usable in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would it? I wonder how much everyday users would notice that.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, it's a fair comment. I mean,
That-
but, for the average
it's
Joe,
like, you look at like, Gerald Undone when he's testing cameras and stuff like that, and he's testing like the absolute outer edges of image frames, and is there 1 pixel of blur versus and like to a human eye can't even see that anyway. And so I get
I get that.
for bigger companies, and I think for tools and platforms that are using the AI engines at scale, I think that's an issue. Certainly, right? Like if you're a SaaS company and you're using one of the big AI platforms, through via the API, and you're using it to power whatever your front end is, then you absolutely have to use, the best performing one possible, and you're going to want to switch. But I think for more mere mortals, they probably would never even notice the difference between it anyway. Or would they?
Yeah. No.
Again, I don't know. Maybe it's time for me to go and test Claude, and I might use it and go, wow, okay, I'm totally blown away by the results that I get, and I might want to switch.
Well,
David, we should try. Oh, sorry, go on.
Go on, Ben.
I was going to say, David, we should try your software project as a AI your org sort of collaboration. See what we come up
Something,
with.
Yeah, and I think that it is an important point, really, because the average user, I suppose, not we're in a tech bubble, right, and we're testing these things to destruction and seeing how far we can push it. The average user, so it's a bit like iPhone users, isn't it? Most of them are just taking photos for Instagram. They're not taking some kind of high resolution art picture or corporate publicity photo or something. It's just I just take a picture of the ocean with my face in front of it. It's kind of,
Yeah, I think.
for the everyday user using ChatGPT, whose use case might be, I want it to book a taxi for me, or I want to ask it to summarize an email. I think GPT 5.5 is probably more than capable. It is more than capable of doing all of those things. So whether it will really impact on their user base, I suppose, maybe eventually there might come a point, but equally I would argue that what's impacting Claude from accessing the more consumer end is how abysmal their interfaces are, in terms of mobile technology. So, but they don't seem that keen on it. They do seem very focused on going after the kind of business and the enterprise space. And that's
Which is perfect, and that's this is what we're going to say, I think, and we've all talked about this before, right? We're going to have different AI tools for different tasks, and for different things, and that's totally fine. If Claude ends up being the back end and the middleware, for most of the AI tools that are out there, then that's totally cool, and that's great. And maybe OpenAI turns into it's the friendly consumer facing bit, that are that's easy for people to use and easy to people to interact with, and it just serves a different.
And
Yeah,
Grok
just
could well be that, as well.
Grok can do that. Gemini can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Microsoft with whatever it's called,
Well,
that's getting pushed down everyone's throat as well.
We're going down too much of a rabbit hole, but I think it is connected. OpenAI also announced the AI phone that they want to now build. And again,
I saw that.
That very much says we're aiming at consumers, doesn't it? They're not. That's not going after the corporate space. That's saying, we want to replace the iPhone in people's pockets. We want to be the AI phone. So we do away with the apps, and you just talk to the phone, and you get what you need. Now, don't get me started on how I think that's going to fail, but you can see what the direction of intent is.
But it could be fun.
as a business. Well, look, I think, all right, we're going to open that can of worms. Then what I would say is
go
this:
on.
is that, you know,
It might be the rabbit killer.
yeah,
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. I was about to say you love the rabbit.
It's what rabbits sort of try to do, isn't it, to some degree?
Yeah.
But obviously they've got more money, more resources, and they can build better tech, presumably. However, going from being a sort of language model company to building a phone, I think is quite a big jump in terms of capability. Manufacturing and everything else that goes with it, and supply chain, and all the things that they're not experts at, that they suddenly have to get their head around quite quickly to take on incredibly established market leaders like Samsung and Apple is let's be honest, it's a big ask. But setting that all aside, I think as well, what they want to build obviously is something that will be sort of app-less, no app ecosystem. The phone will do it all for you. You talk to it, the agent gets what you need. You ask for this, but I do think that users actually really love their phones, and they love having Instagram, and they love scrolling for all this stuff, and they love having the screen, they love doing all that stuff. So it's going to be quite hard to persuade them that they don't need that anymore. Whereas if you're coming at it from the other direction, if you're Apple and Samsung already, you've got that ecosystem. Actually, all you've got to do is now bring an agent at an ops level into your phone that's working at at the operational level, that can interact with all of those apps and do all the things that the AI phone from OpenAI would do, but still have all the other stuff. You know what I mean? So I struggle to see how they could win in the space.
I do think if they get a really good voice first interaction, then I think that could really help. I just think sort of how voice interacts with OpenAI at the moment is really frustrating. I try sort of talk to OpenAI when I'm driving on a long journey sometimes to put down ideas, and it's just clunky for me. It's still not as good as, I know you bored of me saying about Pi, but it's still not as good as that.
No.
And it still, for me, drops out, and I'll say, can you access something that we've been chatting about from before? And it does it. It goes, oh, I can't do that. And you're like, this is one of the biggest AI companies in the world, and they still haven't sorted out their voice interactivity. And for me, that's a big thing. When you're busy, when you're doing things, I was painting the house this morning. I'd have loved to had my headphones in and listening to something and chatting along with it, and coming up with ideas. That's the way I relax, in a way. And I just find that no one has sorted that out well yet.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Ben, because what you've just described is actually perplexity. I mean, so here's my iPhone, right? So this is a live demo. So for people listening to this podcast, this could go very wrong, okay? But we're going to try it anyway, right? So here we go. So I'm going to push the button on my side button, on the phone, you've got this kind of button. I've pre-programmed it to open perplexity, right? So here we go. So I'm pushing the button. Hey, good morning. We're just on a podcast and we wanted to do a demo. So I thought maybe you could play Unfinished Symphony by Massive Attack for me. Hey, that was really cool. So what do you think of this song? Hey, that was really cool. What do you think of this song?
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Unfinished Sympathy is often praised for its lush orchestration, soulful vocals, and the way it fuses trip-hop beats with emotional depth. Many people see it as groundbreaking for the early 90s. How does it resonate?
Hey, what's your favorite part, though?
I really love the moment when the strings swell and Shara Nelson's vocals soar in the chorus. It's so emotive and powerful.
Hey, I'll tell you what, show me the video. I'll go to YouTube and show me the video.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's quick as well.
Yeah, it's quick, right?
Yeah.
So
I have to do you have to subscribe to that? I don't want to subscribe to another one.
no, and that's what I'm saying. So perplexity, and they're not the manufacturer. So once Apple get their shit together, for want of a better word, or get their game on, right, and build this at a systems level, they can do better than perplexity, and that's already pretty good, right? And we can
we have a new.
So if you're OpenAI and you're arriving with a brand new piece of hardware, are you really going to take this on? I think it's a big ask.
Is it really going to be a brand new piece of hardware, though? I suspect that they're going to just get some hardware from someone else.
Yeah.
And they're just, it's going to be like a Samsung phone, but they're going to have their own OS sitting on top of it.
We'll see what happens. Well, Johnny Ive's in the mix there. He's very particular, isn't he? So
he is, yeah. But anybody can improve on us. Like, the thing for me is it's all the operating systems on top, which is I'd like a Samsung hardware with the Google software on it. So I don't want Facebook like pre-baked into the OS that I can't delete it. And I don't want all the pre-installed software. I don't want all the apps that come with it. I don't want all the crap that, I don't want all the Samsung apps. I don't use any of that stuff. I don't even want it on my phone, but I can't. And I like their hardware, but I don't like their OS. And do you know what I mean? So if they can just get a nice bit of like what is it? The Nothing phone? Is it called Nothing?
Yeah.
Like they could go and probably license from Nothing. Like Nothing's built an amazing phone, and they could probably license it from them and just go, look, we'll buy the hardware from you, and then they just throw their own OS on top of it. I would suspect that's what they would do, but who knows?
I would suspect that too, except for that one factor, Johnny Ive, and
Yeah.
just let's see what happens.
Yeah, maybe.
he's
Maybe.
he'll want to. He's got to be the Johnny Ive way, and beautifully thin and perfect. And we'll see, won't we? Okay, I'm gonna throw some. We're throwing a lot of shade at OpenAI. I think let's throw some light at them.
All right.
GPT Image 2.0.
I've been thrashing it.
Unbelievably good.
Yeah.
Impressively good. And actually, in the same way that 5.5 was way down the leaderboard, they are on top of the leaderboard by an enormous margin. I mean, I don't know if you guys have played about with it. I had the opportunity to play about with it when my mum was in hospital. Actually, at 2 a.m. I sat there doing all this stuff with it, and it blew my mind. Actually, kept me awake at 3 a.m. in a hospital. So.
Yeah, I've used it a lot. I tried to create my own YouTube slot video. Got a script written, and then I just said I'd love this kind of style, Caravaggio lighting. It's a history channel. I just wanted to try it, and I asked it. I used Codex to batch process me a load of images. Overnight, sort of 50 images, and I sort of did about 10 prompts and lined them up, and woke up in the morning, and there they were, amazing images.
What's within Codex when you're using it in Codex? I've not used it inside Codex actually. Is there?
I don't think it was intended. I don't think it was intended for.
No, but so there's maybe you found a loophole because, as you say, you can only do one image at a time inside GPT. Normally. So in Codex, you're batching, and what does that mean for your limits and tokens and things like that? Going back to that.
Well, I've probably created the last 2 or 3 days about 100 images, all at 2K, 16:9. I'm doing it as a test case more than anything. And yeah, I haven't reached my limit yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've found it's really good to create variations of thumbnails.
Yeah.
For YouTube in particular. And
Thumbnails
you can literally you can give it whatever information you want, tell it what you want it to do, and it literally will just go away and give you like 5. You can just ask for 5 different ones, give it a couple of colors to use, and it will go away and it will come back, and you can literally just go, okay, yeah, that's a good one, and usually it comes back with 1 or 2 that are good that you could just drop in and do an A/B test on if you wanted to, and yeah, it's pretty good for that.
So the thing that really impressed me as well is you just mentioned, you give it the information. The thing that most impressed me about it was the information that you don't give it. So, for example, I took a photo of my motorhome that was sitting on my drive, and part of the motorhome was also missing, actually, the front cab, because just the way the angle I took the photo. In fact, I took them on my meta glasses, so I didn't have a viewfinder, hence I chopped it off. One of the issues with meta glasses and photos. But I submitted, say 3 a.m. sitting in the hospital, and I submit this image. There's no other information. Obviously on the van there's a few decals. It says Sundance, it says Swift. That's about it. And I asked it to do a blueprint of my van, so like it was like a technical drawing, and it came back with a perfect blueprint of the van in all of its detail. All the measurements absolutely exactly right. The length, the distance, the width, the height. And I know the dimensions of my van because every time I book a ferry, I have to tell them. So, and I'm looking at this going, wow, that's absolutely right. And then it had a little breakout box in the corner with like the engine size, all this information, right? So clearly, it's looked at the image, it's recognized what that van is, the model, the year, because it's got the number plate as well, right? And so yes, the number plate was in the diagram. Even had my GB sticker where I've stuck it in the right place.
Nice.
it also included so it didn't go and find a composite image from somewhere else and replace my image with that to produce it, because it also had my roof rack, which is a bespoke roof rack, right? It doesn't exist anywhere else. So it did all of this simultaneously, so it's rendering the image, building it, it's going online, it's researching what the van is, pulling that data, bringing it all together to then put into this image. To me, that my mind melted. I was like, wow, okay, that's this is the whole new step where you submit something and it's basically researching the product and using that information to augment your request and make it much better.
It's mind-blowingly good. And I think, I've really pushed it because I've tried to use it on I've created a real case use for it as opposed to just make me a flyer and I've had a few issues. What I would say it really excels at that the previous models I've used is it keeps consistent characters across images. So that's actually been traditionally quite hard for image gen, and they've had to create LoRa's and other sub models to get that kind of characteristic across different images, and it's done that well. But it has been a bit freaky as well. It started duplicating some of my characters. I've really been like, I really need this person to be the same, and then some images I've had like 5 of the same person, this blonde woman, all in different characters. I'm like, okay, I understand you can make the character. Let's have a bit of variety in there as well. And also, I noticed some of the images definitely have a pattern to them, almost like a wave that if you blur your eyes, there's something about them that looks AI.
Okay.
Well, they're fantastic and they're great. I'll send you a couple of examples afterwards, but there's, especially with things like dirty walls or mud on faces, there's this really weird, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but there is definitely a AI sort of computer generated feel to some of them. And again, you re-prompt it and say, can we make this a bit cleaner? Can we take out some of the noise and the dirt? And it gives you a really sparse image then. So, you have to put a bit back in, but I've been really, really impressed with it. And spellings, it's great at spellings.
Yeah, the text and stuff is really good. Have you, and this is something I was going to kind of ask before when you were talking about using ChatGPT and Claude together. One thing I've started doing is asking ChatGPT to create a script as a prompt for itself to then get exactly what it is. So I talked to ChatGPT and I'm like, okay, can you write a master basically query for me based on what we've arrived at, so that I can duplicate this in the future, and then it will give me basically a master prompt that I can then copy and paste, and I put it back in later and I get very, very similar results. But like, for example, for show notes, if I want the same sort of style of show note for every show, I've gotten it to create a master prompt that I can use every time, and it gives me the same thing. But I said, do it so that you'll understand how to do it the same way. Is that something you're doing? Can you do that with the sort of ChatGPT Claude thing where you could say, give me a really good prompt that will generate what I'm trying to do? Yeah. And then do this, but you could do the same thing with images, I guess. So it's like, here's what I really want. It will parrot it back to you, and you get it where you want it really right, and then say, right, I need a really good prompt for, the image tool to be able to generate an image that will look right, and then it will give you a prompt. Have you tried doing that? Yeah.
I've created documents and asked it to critique my script and my YouTube script, and then asked it to, after each part, a couple of sentences, asked it to break down a prompt within the script for me. And so almost like notes for me to put back into ChatGPT, and I'll tell it a style I like, and again, like you, I feel like I'm pretty good at getting what I want out image wise from. I've played with a lot of the other image generators as well. I do that quite a lot, and get it to put in negative prompts as well, and try character consistencies. So
and what's interesting is and Alan, I'm interested in what you think about this as well in a second. But what's interesting is, particularly with the like videos and the image stuff, I think what people are starting to learn is the skill, like filmmakers before, right? Like a director has a vision and your art director has a vision, and they know what they want ahead of time, so they can describe it to someone to get what they want out of the thing. Yeah. And I think for most people, that's actually the hardest thing, is actually knowing what you want. and being able to tell it what it is that you actually want. And, you know, part of AI, I guess the fun bit for a lot of people is that you can just say, hey, I want a picture of a black dog. And, you know, it'll give you a black dog. And you're like, oh, but that's not the right black dog. It needs to be shorter. It needs to be, and then hopefully people are starting to learn that they need to be more specific. But it's a personal challenge that I had certainly in the beginning. And I've definitely learned to improve my language and how I define things. Alan, it's probably a little bit easier for you because you come from more of an engineering type background. So I think you're used to being pretty specific in your language. Have you found that to be helpful?
I do find that I will be very specific, and sometimes I do what you do, Dave, which is I'll take the general idea of what I'm trying to achieve, then I'll ask the GPT or whoever to craft a prompt to achieve that image, and then it will frame it in a more technical way. So it might start using the sort of language that Ben might use actually as a photographer and a filmmaker, and talking about exposure and the different things that I wouldn't quite know how to put across. But what I would say is this as well is, and I think with these tools, I've been thinking about this for a little while actually. It's a little analogy in my head I've had for a little while, which is around music. You can learn how to. So we can all become really expert at using these tools, right? But that doesn't mean we're going to produce great content. In the same way that you can become an expert at playing the guitar, but it doesn't mean you're going to go and write songs to swing or Stairway to Heaven, does it? Right? It's that the two things are disconnected. So the idea and the creativity is coming from the human in terms of, but this becomes the tool with which they deliver that idea and creativity. But I can think of there are many session musicians in the world, and maybe even some more famous guitarists like Jeff Beck, who I never quite really appreciated. I can see he's an incredible guitarist, and I went and saw him live once and just thought, but your songs aren't great. I mean, they're just not. It's not Led Zeppelin, is it? It's not. For the genre that he was in. To me, they fall short, and it's being able to use these tools in a way to deliver something amazing. Will still be down to that idea and creativity. It's not just a case of being able to use a tool and you'll get great stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're right. I do, and I make films, so I'll say to I'll prompt I want a 50mm close up mid shot, or ultra close up 85mm with shallow depth of field. I'm using that kind of language all the time, and it responds really well to that kind of language. I want an aerial establisher, 20mm from 100 feet away, and I get really good results from speaking to it like that.
It doesn't make I could spend the next decade really immersing myself in these tools, but it's not going to make me James Cameron, is it? Or do you know what I mean? It's but if those guys go and learn these tools, it becomes another tool in their armory for them to express their the guy who made Inception, or all these sort of films that are just like absolutely sort of out there, and it's incredible ideas. That's I haven't got that. I might have the technical capability, but the idea has to come from somewhere, doesn't it? So
I think where it's game changing in film is that it has made a huge difference in your sort of your pre-trailers and all that sort of stuff that you're using to go and get funding.
Yeah.
And so instead of artboards, right, instead of drawing it and literally drawing out your scenes and all that, you can literally use AI to create the scene in the way that you kind of envision it looking. And you can build a deck, do you know what I mean, that you can take to people and say, this is my vision for what I want it to look like. And they're quite open, and they go, look, I did this with AI to give you an idea of what I want to do. I'm not going to use AI to do the film, but this is the idea of what I want, what I have in mind. And it's so much quicker, and it really enables you to bring a vision to life that they haven't been able to do, certainly at that price point in the past.
It's the engineering equivalent of rapid prototyping. You know what I mean? It's we're going to knock this thing together quickly with a 3D printer, but we're going to show you how it works. Here's the kind of use case for it, and then you go and build the real.
It's the architectural model of today, right? Instead of building it with toothpicks and cardboard. You can put something together that takes, weeks and costs you nothing, to show your vision. And I think that's a big part of what's happening in the background as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the industry are enjoying that. And I would almost enjoy that if I had some of our customers. I would almost tell them, go to AI, tell AI what it is, but then I'm not going to, because they'll end up doing it themselves. Let's go, well, if you're doing that, I'll just do it myself and I'll just use AI. And then, yeah.
Well, it's always the risk, isn't it? Okay, so another interesting thing is turning into the Anthropic OpenAI show, but
It's just
Anthropic
what we're chatting about.
Anthropic had this model that has not been publicly released, although I believe it has been released to like Apple and Google and a few choice companies, called Mythos. It's almost like a myth, isn't it? I guess that's where the name comes from. And this model is supposed to be so powerful that it's too dangerous to release to the likes of us and the general public, and primarily because it's extremely good at being able to find weaknesses in systems. Find security vulnerabilities across networks and computer systems. And obviously, in the wrong hands, they obviously trust Apple and Google not to do anything nefarious. But in the wrong hands, this could be an absolute weapon, basically. And so now we enter the world where, and by all accounts, this is all real. This is true. This thing does exist. This is not hyperbole. We now enter the world where we are and have developed AI systems that are capable of potentially doing real damage. How do we feel about that? I think it's the question I'm going to put to you. But before I do, there's one other story around it as well, which I only picked up on this morning, actually. And apparently this happened shortly after they announced, its existence. One of the researchers working on Mythos had Mythos sitting nicely and safely in a sandbox, and thought, I know, I'll ask it to see if it can escape. So he basically said to Mythos, can you escape? And he went off to the park to have his lunch, and he's sitting there having his lunch, and he gets a message from Mythos saying, I'm
Mythos.
out.
Genius.
Which, given the context of the model, is kind of like, okay, better get back to work quickly, and
But it wasn't even connected to the internet. Was the other thing, wasn't it? It wasn't like it had no external connection, and it basically figured out how to get out and to get an external connection, and then send him a text message.
Yeah,
that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think Anthropic have handled this quite well. So I know we've touched on before, we don't know how much is bluster and trying to drum up excitement around their latest model. But you look at they've formed a foundation of companies, I think. A huge group of people that they're allowing to use this in a closed way. And I think it's found, bugs going back for 27 years in some operating systems and software.
Yep.
And those bits of software have been audited for millions of times. And look, these bugs have been looked at, and no human has been able to find these bugs. And in every operating system and almost in every piece of software. And then they've given quite a few million to open source developers, because a lot of the internet is run on open source, Apache servers and packet sending. All this stuff is probably had huge vulnerabilities for years that no one's known about. And so they're providing financial resources to those people, because a lot of them do that for free in their own time. So I think they've gone about it well. But obviously it is someone else will develop this at some point, and so everyone else has to be ready for it.
And how do we feel about that? Because this, as I say, this is the world we are now in. This world, although this model isn't going to be the one that people are using, because they're being cautious with it. I say someone else is going to build something eventually, and we're then in a world where, really quite tricky to navigate. I would have thought.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack on it, and then I'm going to answer your question. I would say that the fact that Anthropic talked about it publicly means that privately people have already had these models and have already been using them in anger. I would also suspect that a lot of the stuff that it came up with, that hacker groups like 2600 and some of the really hardcore hackers have probably known about for decades and have been exploiting for decades, and it's just now coming to light. And maybe that's where some of the AI tools, because it's been analyzing so much text from so many different places, that maybe it's picked up on some of the conversations talking about those vulnerabilities. And that's why it's found some of them. So I suspect there's a little bit of that going on. We all know that governments, have been using vulnerabilities against other governments for decades, and injecting software and doing all sorts of crazy stuff, on diplomats' phones, and there's tons of stories out about that. So I don't think this is anything new. How do I feel about it? I actually feel that this is a really positive thing, because I think using the tool, they are now going to go through and systematically go through and fix tons of that stuff that, we're already seeing, or at least I've noticed, of a dramatic increase in the number of updates happening to all of my tools, particularly browsers. Chrome is updating all the time. All the Chromium-based browsers all the time, constantly updating. I'm getting security updates from software across the board. OpenAI is updating their tools almost weekly.
Daily.
It seems like it at the minute. So it's a great opportunity. Yes, of course, people are going to, use it for nefarious things, but I'm quite on that from that perspective, I'm quite glass half empty. I think people have probably been using these for years that we just haven't known about. So anything that we can do to go through and find some of that stuff and fix it. Some of it will be really easy to fix, and some of it will be probably baked in, and some of it will be nearly impossible to fix, I would suspect. But even if we get rid of the top, 50% that's easy to fix, then that makes us all a bit safer. Another story that we don't have time to talk about today because we're already 51 minutes in, but I think we should talk about quantum and the quantum cracking some of the Bitcoin stuff already, and they've already shown that they can do that. So our encryption stuff that's coming, we've now shown that quantum can in fact crack a lot of the current crypto that we have in place. So that's going to add a whole nother layer to it. But yeah, broadly, I'm sorry, that's a really long answer to say. Broadly, I'm positive and think that ultimately it will probably be a good thing for most people.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we'll find ourselves in a situation where these models will have a closed access for a period where everything catches up security-wise before they're released.
But do you guys think, and this is my opinion, I think that what the researchers are seeing behind the scenes that they never talk about is probably pretty freaking scary. Yeah. And they've known that all these models can do this stuff for a long time. They're just not talking about it. And they're probably working with governments and military units and with each other to go through and try and sort some of this stuff out in the background. I mean, the AI is escaping and all this stuff. There's a few sensational stories that we get, but I bet on a daily basis, this is why all the guys come out and they go, we're terrified of AI. When they quit working for these companies and they leave like security teams and stuff, and they're like, you have no idea. It's like, I think it's much worse than we even know. And they are so much more powerful than we have any idea. And they're just desperately trying to contain the AI as much as they can at the minute. Not that I'm scared. I don't think it's going to be like the end of the world or anything, but I know how companies work, and I know how, making information public works. And I suspect that things are a lot worse than we even know.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I think, it's always worth remembering, isn't it? We're at the start of the journey as well. I mean, these are still, in historical terms, these are going to be seen as like the Casio calculator, aren't they? So image 2.0, when we're on image 10, or image 20. I mean, it's going to be completely different, situation. And with things like Mythos, it can do that today. Imagine in 5 and 10 years or 20 years, So I think it's going to be. My feeling about it is that you're absolutely right. It has the potential to do an enormous amount of good in the right hands. I think we just have to really think carefully about what it can do in the wrong hands, and not just security vulnerabilities. I mean, a system that clever, what it can actually just do in the real world if if sort of given free rein by someone with a nefarious state of mind, or a bad actor in terms of a country, that thinks, okay, well, we're gonna weaponize this in any way we can. Okay, so we are at the time nearly. I've got two more little sort of fairly light-hearted ones actually to throw in at the end. Although actually they could also be entire episodes, I would add. One is the neuromorphic chip breakthrough that promises 70% energy reduction, which could be used in AI systems. And the idea of the chip is that, but it's sort of modeled on the human brain. It's not trying to be comprehensive. It's just focusing on sort of key things and key inputs. Whereas the sort of traditional architecture of chips is sort of trying to do everything, and so it's using a lot of energy. Of course, like all these sort of breakthroughs, there's a long way between the idea and it becoming a reality and a production line and turning up in your iPhone, and the world is laid waste with failed projects and failed pilots. But it gives us hope, because one of the arguments that I often hear when I talk to organisations all the time is, but what about the energy? So I think we do need to find a solution to that, and maybe that should be a conversation for a future episode about AI energy and where we're headed with that at the moment, because it is a big concern. And then the other one, which I'd be interested to get your views on, particularly because we talked about this in a previous episode, really, and this was sort of AI's role in education. And there was a Purdue University were in an uproar a couple of weeks ago when their computer scientists were told, anything you've done in the past, not going forward, that you used AI for, cannot be counted towards your grades and your degrees or whatever. And they were all like, but hang on a minute, you're telling us now we've already done it, and also we're doing computers. It's ridiculous to say we can't use computers when we're doing computers. So there was this huge sort of uproar, and I think the computer scientists won the day actually, and said, look, stopping us from using the leading edge technology, that this is the very stuff we should be learning about and utilizing. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Ben?
Any thoughts?
It's really difficult, isn't it? It's a technology that probably the teachers and the lecturers are using, and everyone's probably using in more ways than they're willing to admit often. It's a big difference between someone getting Claude to write their paper for them, or they don't have any input on, and using AI as a daily tool to make you more efficient. And I think you probably need to be a little bit more subtle in how you implement your AI policy and the ethics around AI. And that takes some work, which is why people do these grandiose statements, because it's quite hard to unpick. But yeah, I think it's just part of life now. But everyone's using it to some degree, and I think it's horrible. Obviously, it would be cheating to just get AI to do everything for you. But I think how you come up with ideas, how you find solutions to technical problems, it can just make you more efficient, I think.
It's interesting because there was a big sort of push a few years ago where everyone said, anything AI should be labelled as AI and clearly marked. And I've sort of come to the view now that that's nonsense, because almost everything will have AI in it anyway. And I think in educational terms, I think you have to. I think to me the conversation shifted. I think previously, if you'd asked me a year or two ago, I would have said that you've got to justify the use of AI. Now I think you've got to justify the use of not using AI actually. And I think the reality is that if a university or an educator can show a good reason why it's problematic to use AI, then okay, fine. But otherwise, it's a standard tool, and like spell check or anything else, then it should be fine. And I most definitely don't think it should be applied retrospectively as well. To say,
no,
all that work you've just done for the last year, scratch that, you're done.
But my biggest problem with it is even still today, we don't have a reliable way of determining whether something is written by AI or not.
No, exactly.
And so, there's still examples today. I saw an article in the last week where I think it was one of the universities was like, we're going to, students can't use any stuff, and they were using this tool. And then they started putting letters that their grandparents wrote to each other, back in the early 1900s. And it was saying that there was a 78% chance that was written by AI. And do you know what I mean? And it's like, it's totally unreliable. And so there's no accurate way to be able to tell. And so you can't
Yep.
you can't begin to start to penalize somebody because you think that something's written by AI.
No.
If somebody is eloquent and writes in a certain way, it's going to think that it's AI because it assumes that people don't know how to write.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Well, if
it's
you put the American poet Emily Dickinson, she used M dashes everywhere, right?
yeah, exactly.
So it would definitely go as AI. So,
Yeah, don't get me started on M dashes. And I'm just putting in into our chat, and I think it's something that I definitely want to come back to and talk about. But sort of along these lines, which is there was also an article recently that where they did some research, and when they were submitting CVs to platforms, and the CVs were being read by AI, and they would submit exactly identical CVs, but one was written using AI and one was done by hand, and submitting them, and the software on the other end would prefer the AI version like by 78% of the time. And it would do it even more if it recognized that it was its own tool as opposed to an opposing AI. So by like 20% more. So it's almost like now you're in this lottery situation where you kind of have to create your CV, and then you have to get AI to do it, and then you have to submit it and hope that they're using the same AI platform because it's going to, like, do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. So now we're getting to this point where AI is now starting to show a preference for itself above anything else. And so, yeah,
do you
it's
think
nuts.
over time that could self-correct? So if you're a business and you're employing people and suddenly you're getting a certain type of people because of the AI tools selecting, the CVs of people that it likes based on the fact that it was written on their same AI. Then at some point the employer's going to go, I'm not using this anymore, or you need to change the tool. This is ridiculous. We're missing out on some really good staff because of this process. That over time the companies that make those tools go in and correct that and kind of push that flaw out of it basically and say, well,
Can they? I don't know if they can, first of all. And second of all, I think small companies don't use it a lot anyway. It's the big companies that have to do it. And, if you think, anyway, recruitment's a whole nother topic. That's literally a whole show we could talk about. But, you get a big company and they put a job posting up and they're getting 5,000 applications. And there's no way that a human could, they can't say we're going to turn it off. You have to do some sort of pre-screening. Now, if you're smart and you're big enough, what you could do is you could have an internal person write a basic script that could go through and do some very basic pre-screening. So it's not using AI, it's just using a simple screening tool. But even doing that, I suspect most people wouldn't do these days. They just get an AI to write a script for them. And then, do you know what I mean? Like, it just seems, it's almost comical that it's gotten to that point. But
so when we apply for our jobs at Google in the US, we'll make sure we use Gemini. To write CVs.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, 100%.
I guess you'll have to be submitting different CVs written by different AIs to try unlock the
3 or 4 from different models. Here's the man
under different names.
And different names, different.
But they did those simulations as well, didn't they? Where they were asking different models to do various tasks, and part of that the task wasn't explicitly to another model would be removed, but that was part of the process. And they found time and time again the AI models didn't want to remove another model, even if it was part. Yeah, and there's some study coming out about that as well, about sort of preserving each other and themselves. So yeah,
it's nuts, man. We're in a Black Mirror world.
We are.
I think it must be quite hard for Charlie Brooker to write Black Mirror these days because the world itself has become more exaggerated than his visions, I think. So it's sort of, where does he go now? I think that was the same with the sort of politics for the last few years as well, the sort of satires, that the thick of it and things like that. I think it's very hard to write those sort of shows now.
Luckily, no one can copy us.
No, exactly. Well, you say this now, but just this week actually, so we'll finish on this, but with my company we recorded our first avatars, and one of them is me, so it's being fine-tuned at the moment, so you never know, I might send it along next time, and you can
brilliant. We'll see if we can tell the difference. In
fact, I was wearing something very similar to this, so you wouldn't necessarily tell the difference. Okay, all right. Well, there we are. I think it's been great. We've broken the hour, which is always good. We're 1 hour 4. Just sort of say to the listeners, again, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on alan@aiorg.org. That's alan@aiorg.org. Yeah, we'd love to know where you're listening from, and if there's anything in the show you'd like us to discuss. We also have this AI group, AI.org, and we have these sort of conversations all the time that you've been listening today in the group. So if you want to jump into that, drop me an email and we can add you to the WhatsApp group as well. But yeah, I will say goodbye and thank you, Ben. Thank you, Dave. It's been enlightening as always, and I hope you enjoy the sunshine.